Assalamu alaikum. I am very deeply honored and humbled to be here. I guess now I can say to the world that I've been to a place called Stillwater, Oklahoma. I want to say congratulations to the Muslim Student Association on an incredible evening. Look around, my friends, a Saturday night. We're in this room together, packed house, people standing in the back because there's not enough seats, representing the beautiful diversity of our beloved Muslim American communities. But you did forget a pretty important country. Shout out to my friends in the room from Bangladesh. Where's my Bangladeshis out? All right. There's some other ones that are missing, but I had to shout out my people. You know, tonight seemed, as I walked in here, a very beautiful and celebratory evening. And I hate to be the one to take you from a celebratory place to a real place of where I am today. I come here to Stillwater with a broken heart. And every day, my heart breaks more and more. And I wonder, in a short time, will I even have a heart left to break? Today, February 17th, Saturday, we are living in a world together where there is an active genocide, one that is paid for by you and me in this room. 35,000 plus human beings have been slaughtered. About 13,000 of those are Palestinian children. I want you to sit with that just a minute. What's happening in Palestine is not the first atrocity that we have witnessed in this world or have learned about. You and I can sit here for days. Cambodia, Rwanda, Darfur, the Holocaust. We can go on and on and on. What makes this different, my friends, is that we're watching it in live stream, HD TV, in full color. At any moment right now, you can pick up your cell phone, open a social media platform, and you can watch a Palestinian child hanging from a building, or Palestinian fathers pulling their children from under the rubble, or Palestinian children at a hospital running frantically looking for their mother. Videos of bodies covered in white shroud. Or children waiting for hours on a line just to get a spoonful of rice. You may even watch videos of citizens of the state of Israel who are on the Israeli border with Gaza, blocking food and aid to the Palestinian people. I loved seeing the pride that the young people had in this room of where they come from. And I want to share a little bit about the pride that I have as a Palestinian American. I didn't ask to be Palestinian. You don't ask to be from India or from Bangladesh or from Greece or from Mexico. That's not how that works. What I believe about today is that I was born for this moment. I am so unapologetically Palestinian, and never in my life have I been more proud to be Palestinian. I am a daughter of Palestinian immigrants. My parents chose to come to this country. They made a decision to leave their parents, their siblings, their cousins, their friends, their schoolmates, everything that they knew and everything that they loved, to come to these United States of America. And they chose to come here because they did not want me and my siblings to be born under a brutal military occupation. And they knew that if I was born in Palestine, I would not be offered the same opportunities that I would be offered in these United States of America. So my parents sacrificed. And you better believe that I am going to make my journey and the journey of my parents to America worth it. So I will be unapologetically Palestinian. And I will defend the right of my people to live in full freedom and liberation. Because that is the reason why my parents came to this country. So that their children can be born here and be excellent and be proud and continue to defend our existence as Palestinians. We live in a country where this President of the United States of America, during an active genocide, bypassed Congress twice to sell tank shells and artillery and weapons to the state of Israel. We live in a country that is advocating to pass a bill in Congress to send $14.8 billion more to the state of Israel. We live in a country where the President of the United States of America claimed to make a case for a temporary ceasefire while also making a deal to send more weapons to the state of Israel. And just to be on the record and to be very clear with everybody in this room, that we are not calling for a temporary ceasefire. There is no vacation or breaks from genocide. We are looking for and demanding a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. We also live in a country that silences those that fight for the liberation of the Palestinian people. We live in a country where college students on campuses across America are experiencing disciplinary hearings, some suspended from college campuses, targeted by administrations, for just engaging in what America claims to be founded on, the freedom of speech, the protection of free assembly. Apparently in America, there's democracy until it comes to fighting for the liberation of the Palestinian people. What I hope that you all understand in this room is that for 75 years, the Palestinian people have been loud, demanding full freedom and liberation. And I want to be clear for those of you who don't really understand Palestine and historic Palestine. Home to the Muslims, Christians, and Jews. My grandmother was born in 1927, 21 years before the creation of the State of Israel. And I promise you, my friends, that the Palestinians, we know coexistence. We know what it means to live peacefully with Muslims, Christians, and Jews because they lived it. Our grandparents and great-great-grandparents lived it. So we do not need the current political state of Israel to lecture us about peace because we have always been a people of peace. 75 years of displacement and dispossession, of stealing olive trees, stealing the homes of our great-great-grandparents, and pushing Palestinians into refugee camps in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, and all over the world. Palestinians are one of the largest refugee communities in the world. There are many folks and many Palestinians right now who are third and fourth generation refugees. And even in Gaza, the majority of the people in Gaza right now were already refugees before October 7th. And now, because of the many times that they have evacuated just over the last 5 months, they are now refugees twice and 3 times and 4 times over. And now we're watching it happen again with the warning of a ground invasion in Rafah. Sisters and brothers, you are living a moment in history. And we've heard many generations before us say, never again, never again. But it is happening today, in this hour, right now. And I say to people in this room, and I consider you all to be already sympathetic to the cause. And one of the things that devastates me as a Palestinian American is this. How many more? What else do the people of Gaza have to do? They showed you their children slaughtered. They showed you their fathers blown to pieces and their children carrying them in plastic bags. I've shown you children without arms and without legs. They showed you mothers wailing for those that they love. You have watched journalists, over 135 journalists in Gaza, assassinated. How many times have we seen a journalist sharing their story, sharing a story, and looking to their right and finding their families being wheeled into the hospital that the journalist is telling their stories from? How many of you wake up every day to make sure that Bisan is still alive? Or that Hind Khudairi is still there to tell their stories? How many times a day do you look for Lema? Or continue to demand that the Prime Minister of Canada help rescue Mansour Shuman? Sisters and brothers, the question is, what are we willing to do today? A lot of times people say to me, Sister Linda, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm outraged. I'm horrified. I sit in grief about what's happening in Palestine. There's so much we can do. We are not doing enough. Oftentimes I hear people criticizing those who do and create direct action, even in places like Oklahoma. People get mad when young people are shutting down highways. Why? Is it because you're going to be a little late to a dinner party? Are you showing up a few minutes late to work in the morning? When there is a genocide that is happening, it is our responsibility to create discomfort in the society that we live in. When there is a genocide, that is the moment that you look for courage in your heart. That voice that you believe that you don't have, it is there. And it is time to use it for the Palestinian people. Give you a little bit of a history lesson. Since we are in the month of February, and I'm just going to put this on the record. Black History Month for me is January 1st to December 31st. That's Black history every day. Black history is American history. It's Muslim history. It's everybody's history. But since we are in the official month of Black History Month, I want to remind you some revered people that are remembered in this country, oftentimes out of context. This is a month where you're going to hear a lot about Dr. Martin Luther King. And everyone's going to tell you about Dr. Martin Luther King and how Dr. Martin Luther King was this nice, peaceful man. And he was bringing everybody together. And it always bothered me every year, every time I watched everyone from the right all the way to the left and everybody in between commemorating Dr. Martin Luther King. How is that possible? How is that possible that everybody loved Dr. Martin Luther King? It's because over the course of history, we have whitewashed who in fact Dr. Martin Luther King is and was. Because if you lived at the time of Dr. King, you would be surprised about what you know about him now. Dr. King, when he was alive, was declared the most dangerous Negro in America by J. Edgar Hoover, who was the head of the FBI at the time. Imagine being called the most dangerous black man in America by the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigations. The organizations that Dr. King was affiliated were blacklisted by the United States government. At the time, they did a study, a survey, that found that 66% of Americans did not agree with what Dr. King had to say or the demands of the civil rights movement. Do people know how many death threats Dr. King received before the ultimate day that he was assassinated? Oftentimes people forget where Dr. King left off. People say, oh, we are carrying on the legacy of the civil rights movement. We have taken the baton, but the baton ended when Dr. King got up and declared his opposition to the war in Vietnam. And the people told him, don't do it. You're gaining momentum for black civil rights in America. Don't get into international stuff. Stay away from the war in Vietnam. And guess what happened? A lot of his friends walked away. A lot of his donors walked away from him. And that last speech that Dr. King gave, that I hope you all listen to because it's very relevant to this moment. In a part of the speech that he gave, he said, I see the promised land, but I might not get there with you. Dr. King knew that his time was up and that danger was imminent. So when they tell you that Dr. King was this man that was bringing people together and he was such a peaceful man, just know that Dr. King, in the time when he was organizing, had a lot of enemies. A lot of people who were trying to silence him. A lot of people telling him to be careful, to be cautious, that standing up against war, that standing up for what he believed in could cost him things, cost him opportunities, cost him resources and funding. And Dr. King defied those things because he believed in doing the right thing. He believed every time was the right time to do the right thing. I also remember the words of Ida B. Wells, who was an investigative journalist during the civil rights movement. And every time I hear Israeli propaganda, just like we heard about UNRWA, imagine the state of Israel claimed that a few staff members of about 15,000 people who work for UNRWA, the largest humanitarian organization in Gaza since 1948, was defunded by the United States government because the state of Israel told them that 4 people may have been involved in the October 7th attacks. And until today, February 17th, no evidence has been presented about these allegations, and the people in Palestine continue to starve. because the largest humanitarian organization with the infrastructure to feed and serve the Palestinian people was defunded by multiple countries who followed the lead of the United States of America. And so why do I remember the words of Ida B. Wells? Here's what she said. Those who commit the murders write the reports. That's why I never believe a state like Israel. Because those who commit the murders write the reports. Similarly to America, when we see police officers who murder unarmed black people in America, the first thing people will say to me is, read the police report. And my initial response is always to say this: those who commit the murders write the reports. The bravest during the times of the civil rights movement, from Black Panther Party members like Fred Hampton, to Medgar Evers, to Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, guess what they all have in common? What do you think they all have in common? They were all assassinated for speaking truth to power. So that has always been a thing in this country. The United States of America does not like truth tellers. They don't like people who stand up against the status quo. But in a time of an active genocide, on live stream, it is the moment I am calling you to speak truth to power. Because they might try to target me. They might try to target CAIR. They might try to target a Muslim student leader. But guess what? If we're all doing it, they can target us all. So what are we going to do moving forward? There's so much that we could do. We live in a country that has taught us individualism. Many of you know, if you come from other cultures, Black culture, any ethnic culture, Mexican culture, Central Americans, South Americans, South Asians, Southeast Asians, people from the Arab world, it doesn't really matter where you're from. Anywhere that's outside of this country, except of course for indigenous culture. You know what we learn in our cultures? We're community. We take care of one another. We don't let our neighbors go hungry. We are taught that it takes a village to raise a child. We live that in African culture. We live that in all the cultures that we come from, all the cultures that you saw represented here today. And then our parents come to a country that teaches you every man and woman for themselves. As long as you got health care, as long as you got a job, don't worry about everybody else. Those houseless people, those homeless people, this country teaches you it's their fault that they're homeless, instead of that this state has failed those homeless people. I say that to all of you because that taught us also to undermine our capacity to show up for one another. So when you hear that there's a rally in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, or in Oklahoma City, sometimes you say to yourself, nobody's gonna miss me. I don't feel like going today, but I want to teach you something as an organizer. Mass mobilization is 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. That is mass mobilization. So do not ever underestimate your individual body to show up at a rally or to show up at a protest. Then you might ask me this question: Sister Linda, does doing protest and rally really matter? I don't see, it hasn't really changed anything, and there's still a genocide that's happening. Let me tell you why people rally and protest. It's not necessarily going to end a genocide, but what you are doing is you are protecting and maintaining the little of humanity that is left. It is you reminding people in your community, your neighbors, people on the highway driving by, that there are people in this country who care, people in this country who are aware of what's happening, and that you are standing and saying, enough is enough, I will not stand for this. I'm going to share with you a little story I learned a few years ago that was very inspiring for me about this idea of showing up as an individual. There was an old man, an old white man who, during the Vietnam War, he stood outside the White House every single day. He had a sign opposing the Vietnam War and a candle. And one day a journalist saw him, and he went the first day, and he skipped another day, and he came the other week, and came 2 weeks in a row, and a month later, and the same man was standing in the same spot with the same sign and the same candle. And so the journalist went up to him and he said, "Excuse me, sir, I see that you're standing here. You've been standing here for days. Do you really believe that you standing here with the sign and candle is going to change these people in this White House?" And so the man looked at the journalist and said, "Oh, no. I'm not here because I believe me standing here with the sign and candle is going to change them. I'm here because I won't allow them to change me." So when you show up for Palestine, when you show up for our immigrant and refugee communities, when you show up for black communities, when you show up for school children, when you show up for marginalized people, that is a way for you to reaffirm your humanity. And it is a message to the world that you will never forfeit your humanity. You will never go on in this world like what's happening around you is normal. And that is why I get up every day and I show up. Because I need to protect my humanity, because we have to pass something on to generations to come. A lot of people ask me every time they see me, and I'm going to say this in this room, and I hope that you can share this message. Everybody, anytime somebody sees me somewhere, they say, "Sister Linda, who are we going to vote for?" That's literally the question of the day. I get that question about 26 times a day. Here's my answer to the question. Please don't talk to me about an election during an act of genocide. Don't gaslight Muslims. Don't gaslight Palestinians. We are focused right now on ending the genocide of our people and do not have time for an electoral conversation. So that's number one. For those of you who want to know what's going to happen in November, here's what my message is to all of you. All politics is local. All politics is local. Some of the most horrific legislations that Oklahoma has seen and will see happens in your state legislature. It happens and gets signed by your governor. So if you don't know what you're going to do all the way at the top of the ticket, I still need you to show up to the polls. And I still need you to vote down the ballot all the way to the bottom, to the school board. Because we need to understand that all politics is local, and what happens in your state legislators, what happens in your city council members, in your city councils is what impacts your lives and the lives of your communities and families every single day. So don't forfeit your right to vote because you are outraged by what's happening in Palestine or what's happening on the national level. Remember that the issues that impact you directly, quickly, oftentimes are happening in your state legislature. I will never forfeit my right to vote in this country. You know why? Because blood was shed. And even when I'm not excited during an election, I still get up and I walk to the polls and I cast a vote in honor of those who came before me, who fought for my right and your right to go into a ballot box and participate in this democracy. So don't give up your right to vote. Don't let your rage keep you from participating even in this very flawed democracy. Give, my friends. Oftentimes, we're taught as college students, I'm a college student, Sister Linda, I don't really have a job right now, or I have a part-time job. I don't really have much to give, so I'm not really a donor. And I always say to people, You got to sacrifice. Everybody has to sacrifice. You know, a lot of folks, before we all were boycotting Starbucks, I'm sure you still find some joy in getting a nice cup of coffee, an iced coffee from another place. Or something else that brings you joy. And I've told this to college students in the past, and a lot of them said, Sister Linda, I never thought about it like that. What if you said every week I'm going to put $5 to the side? And at the end of the month, I'm going to have $20. And every month, I'm going to give $20 to an organization that does work on an issue that I care about. Maybe it's an issue like immigration or immigrant rights. Maybe you care about mentorship of young people of color. Maybe you care about civil liberties and civil rights and you want to give your $20 a month to your local CAIR chapter. Maybe you want to give it to your local mosque who's doing some great organizing work, maybe to a food pantry, maybe to a humanitarian organization that's supporting Palestinians or Syrian refugees or helping the Turkish people post an earthquake, by the way, that they never recovered from. Because you see how we move on as a people? That was literally 1 year ago. 50,000 people died in Turkey. Do you remember that, folks? Do you remember? Many of them Syrian refugees that went to Turkey to seek refuge and were killed in an earthquake. You saw how the world moves on? Do you think those people already rebuilt their homes? Do you think that their lives are back together? We already moved on. A year later, and not a single person I know still brings up earthquakes in Turkey. And then after that, remember, floods in Libya, Morocco. We just move on as a people. As if these horrific things, some of them natural disasters, some of them based on climate change, didn't happen. So make an intention today and say, you know what, Sister Linda's right. I can get 5 of my friends to give $20 a month, and every month we're going to give an organization $100 that we care about and help support. Something else we could all do. We all find ourselves in school environments, workplaces, other social places. I have this motto called, don't let things slide. Don't let things slide. If you are in a conversation where someone is saying something derogatory about black people, about immigrants, about refugees, about Jews, about Muslims, about any minority group, don't let it slide. Say something. Say, excuse me, I don't agree with what you're saying. In fact, not only do I not agree, I'm offended by what you're saying. And I hope that you never repeat these things ever again because it is unacceptable. We live in a society sometimes where we let people slide. And when you let people slide, you allow it to foment, you allow them to believe that it's acceptable to engage in Islamophobia, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-black racism, ableism. We can name it all. So I hope that you are going to be people, based on the book I wrote called, We Are Not Here to Be Bystanders. I, my friend, am not a bystander. I will not allow unacceptable behavior to happen in my presence, and I hope that you too are committed to not allow derogatory statements, harassment of anyone in your presence. The last thing that I'll say is the most important. We live in the digital age, and I don't want to age myself, but I was around in the days of dial-up internet. I was around when those first computers came out, like the ones that were like a box, like an old television. That was me. When I was organizing in 2001, guess what I did? I talked to human beings. I went to the door and I was talking to you in the community. We live in this age now where everybody's on social media and you think that's how you're going to have a human interaction. And this is part of the sad world that we live in today. So one of the things that I hope that you do, And we can start right here in this room. Get to know somebody. Go up to somebody today at the event and say, hey, how you doing? What's your name? This is my name. Where are you from? This is where I'm from. What do you do? Have an actual conversation with somebody that you do not know. And I hope you carry it outside of this room. And I had this experience. I went to a college campus, and a woman was giving me a tour. She was actually a department chair. She was taking me around. She was showing me different parts of the university. And she walked into this area that had a lot of little cubicles, and people were sitting in the cubicles. And I stopped, you know me. I said, hello, how you doing? What's your name? What's your name? These are human beings that I passed by. I asked her, she said, guess what? She said, I just learned that man's name today because you asked him. But he works in her department. So oftentimes we go to work and we don't even know the names of the people we work with. We sit in a classroom and we don't know the names of our fellow classmates. And so what I hope that you do is get to know your neighbors. I don't know about folks in this room, but I lived at a time where my mother knew everybody on my street. We knew people's names. If we needed something from our neighbor, we could go knock on the door and say, hey, do you have this thing? Can we borrow this thing from your house? These days, people will buy a home and live on a street for 10 years, and they'll tell you they don't know any of their neighbors. I want to live in a world where we know our neighbors, where we respect our neighbors, where our neighbors feel safe to come knock on our doors and ask us for help. And so I want to say to the Muslim Student Association how proud I am of you, of organizing this event, of bringing people. Look at this room. There's literally somebody from everywhere in this room. And I have sat in this room mesmerized, knowing that only a great group of people can bring this type of diversity and beauty into this room. And I know that we went from celebratory, and I know that I killed the vibes tonight. But it is my responsibility to do that. To let you know that there is something horrific that's happening in this world, that we are complicit as individuals, as a nation, sometimes even as our universities, who are invested sometimes in things that they shouldn't be invested in. Sometimes our city pensions, state pensions are invested in things that we should not be invested in. So think about those questions. Think about your role. And vow today to do one thing a day for the Palestinian people. Whether that's giving something, giving a donation to a humanitarian organization, whether that's making a post about Palestine, whether that means you're showing up to an event about Palestine or a rally about Palestine, whether it's reading an article or reading a book about Palestine or talking or speaking to a Palestinian, don't forget the Palestinian people. Keep them with you every single day. And let us hope that after a permanent ceasefire, that we do not walk away from the Palestinian people. Because the Palestinian people believe that a ceasefire is only the beginning. And the next place we need you is to end the occupation, break the siege on Gaza, and fight for a free and liberated Palestine. Thank you very much.